Kia ora and welcome to CIO Leadership Live New Zealand. I'm your host, Kathy O'Sullivan, editor for CIO New Zealand. And my guest today is Nicholas Puri, Vice President for ICT at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. Hello, Nicholas. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kathy. I'm good, and you?
Looks like a very busy morning there at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare.
Yeah, it's pretty busy. It's a little bit cold and windy as well, but we're indoors, so that's good.
Great. So to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare and what your team does there?
Sure. So as you said, my name is Nicholas. I'm the Vice President of ICT, which would otherwise be often called the CIO. So I look after the wider digital IT function here. We're about 140 people strong in New Zealand and about 22 globally in the IT division. So look after a broad spectrum, digital transformation stuff, operation projects, etc. Yeah.
So a huge role there, and obviously transformation is a huge part of what you do at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. You know, lots of development, especially in the last few years. And often we talk about transformation as if it's a given, as if it's an easy thing to do. But in reality, transformation can be quite challenging. So can you talk us through how that approach has taken shape in your own career?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think one thing that's been quite important for me, and it's something that we talk about in the team a lot, is this concept of not transforming for the sake of transforming, but trying to understand what is the problem ultimately that we need to solve, and having a really good grasp on that. It's actually something that's quite culturally sort of interwoven at F&P, is really taking the time to study and know the problem before we do any sort of transformation, whether it's digital or not. So that's something that I've taken to heart and keep quite close to me through my career here, at least. Yeah.
So you mentioned there, you know, understanding the heart of the problem. Are there any kind of key steps you think CIOs must take along the way when you're going through a transformation and you know, walking back from the end product, but actually that's kicking it off? What are kind of the key things you think CIOs must take along the way?
Yeah, and I think the one thing that's really important to me is that any form of transformation, and obviously we're talking about digital transformation here, is I feel it's really important that it's not IT driven. I think things like this should be business driven. Ultimately, the business knows their process, and it's their process that needs to be optimized or changed. I think where we have the role to play is we can help lead and drive that transformation, but ultimately we want to put the ownership of the transformation in the hands of the business. We think that's really, really important. I do see this not always followed in some organizations, and that can result in, you know, this is just an IT project, which is really not what we want to be doing here. So that's quite important to me. And I think the other thing that's really important is making sure that we spend the time to get under the hood on business process and really understand how the business works. So I think one thing that's worked well for us is taking the time just to get in the business and just learn how they do things before we do anything, so that we can form a team that's got strong business knowledge. That's been really important for me. Yeah.
So I see you're literally on the shop floor there. So, you know, understanding the wider business is obviously really important to you. But of course, you know, there are challenges in any transformation, you know, whether it's legacy or budget or, you know, that internal culture around change. So what are some of those kind of common roadblocks that you've encountered, and how have you helped overcome them along the way?
Yeah. One roadblock I often see occurring is where a project or a project team does not necessarily think about whether what they're doing is sustainable in the long run. We have this concept of sustainable growth. So thinking about what works now and what's going to work 10 years from now. It's quite easy for us to, you know, spend $10 million on a fancy solution, and it's great now, and it adds a lot of value. but 5 to 10 years from now, it starts to unwind itself in some form. So I think a roadblock that I often try and help the team to understand is this the right thing now and into the future? And that may sometimes involve thinking about a slower pace, maybe a more conservative risk-based approach. It may not be necessarily as flash as what you might initially envision, but it gets you to the point where you have a solution that really meets the business need for the long term. So that's a roadblock we often encounter, because it's quite easy to go for the pretty flash things that look amazing. Does it really meet the long-term sustainable growth needs of the business? I can't emphasize that point enough. It's really, really important for us. Yeah. The other thing I think is important when we're talking about roadblocks is not having people that I describe as being T-shaped. A T-shaped person is someone who has breadth of knowledge, but also has a deep core skill set, and they can roll up their sleeves and just get stuck in. I often see projects being put together where we don't have T-shaped people, and everyone's kind of has a specialized silo, but no one's really willing to stretch beyond their bounds and just roll up their sleeves. I think if you have a team that is very T-shaped, everyone's going to just have each other's backs and just aim to get the job done. So that's a roadblock that I sometimes come across.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that sustainability focus is so important as well. I love that thinking about not only how this change impacts things now, but into the future. It's a really good way of looking at things. So I'm curious then, Nicholas, how do you view transformation? Do you think there's ever an end date to it? Do you like to see it as a project with milestones and deadlines, or do you just view transformation as an ongoing development?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of points there that I'd like to talk about. The first one is I feel it's really important for any project or transformation that there are really clearly defined milestones, and there's a really clearly defined done criteria. At what point do we say that this is done, so that we're all aiming for something and there's a common goal. However, I don't think these things ever really end, because once you've implemented something, and once you've transformed something, it needs to be optimized, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be, we need to continue to extract the value from that. So it never really ends. And I think there's a real risk in bringing technology into a business and going down a pathway of set and forget. We might have met the initial goals, but you fast forward 5 years from now and it's a big redundant piece of technology. So I think a really important success criteria for any big transformation is to just make sure that you've got the teams and the people and the resources in place to continue to optimize beyond that initial goal that you set. And that's something I often see is forgotten and not really followed through. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And what then around, change fatigue? Is there a risk of having change fatigue if we are always transforming?
Totally. I think it's a big risk. I see this in our industry. I see this in other industries. It's a term I call digital fatigue. Employee comes to work every day and they have to interact with 10, 15, 20, 30 different systems just to get their job done. It's a big risk, and I think as you're transforming, you've got to consider what this is along the whole sustainability point that I mentioned earlier. What is going to work for us now and into the future, and what's going to take away from our people from doing their jobs? If they're constantly just managing systems every day, then we're taking away from them doing their jobs. So transformation's got to think about the user experience, the cultural impact of those changes. It's got to think about behavioral consequences. I think these are hugely important things that are often overlooked, but are immensely important. Yeah.
Indeed. So you mentioned earlier about T-shaped employees, but as CIO, in what ways do you yourself collaborate and influence the leadership team and the rest of the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple of things that we try and do, and that I try and do myself. The first of all is um, we're trying as much as possible to make sure that our people can interact with the business, with executives, with the senior leadership team without us. So I'm constantly trying to figure out ways and encourage my leadership team, or my team, anybody in my team, to have conversations with senior leaders in the business without us, and trusting them that they can go and have those conversations and build up the knowledge themselves without us being there. We really push this whole concept of face-to-face collaboration. If you can go and have a face-to-face conversation with somebody in the business, that's going to add immense value. Trusting our people that they can go and have conversations without us, knowing that there might be some risk, that they may not have all the answers, but if the risk is worth taking, it's going to far outweigh not having them involved in this conversation. So it's really just trying to empower people more and more to go and collaborate and influence on their own accord with their own initiative. And an example of that is, we every quarter we bring all of the executive team together into a room, and I take a step back. I don't really get involved, and my leadership team calibrate with them on what's coming up, what needs to be adjusted, and what the focus is. And that's something that's completely hands off from our perspective, and that's been quite successful.
That's a great example there of working cross-functionally and, empowering your team to step up. So, the role of CIO, Nicholas, is ever evolving. There's many more titles now, a variety of titles from, Vice President for ICT to, CTO, CDO, Chief Innovation Officer, lots of different titles and a lot of similarities in the roles and a lot of differences. But what do you think are some of the key attributes of a modern day CIO when it comes to leadership?
Right. So this is something I'm quite vocal and passionate about, and my team know me for saying this. But I actually think that digital transformation is a bit of a naughty word internally. We actually don't like to use it, for the simple reason is that I think for the modern IT professional, we've actually transcended that. I think for me, the real value add for the modern IT professional is an individual who has strong business knowledge that can be called upon by anybody in the business to come to the area and help them solve a problem or understand an opportunity and be involved in the solutioning of that, whether it's a digital solution or not. So changing the face of the IT professionals, that they are seen as extremely business savvy, with deep understanding of business processes, that can be called upon as experts. I think that is the future of the modern IT professional. Now, I use the example of my dad. He's in his 70s, and he set up his own home wireless laptop, printer, internet, all by himself. And he's the most untech savvy person that you will know. And I was quite disappointed that he never phoned me. And when I asked him why, he said, "It's easy. Stuff is easy. Why do I need your help?" And this is kind of an anecdote for a lot of technology these days. It is actually easy. There are a lot of things that are hard that require specializations, but by and large, most people can self-service. So the value add for me, for people like myself and my team, is that business knowledge, being strong business understanding.
Absolutely. And great that your dad was successful in setting up his Wi-Fi. It means that whoever created that product had the customer in mind, which is always good to hear. So looking internally then, it is, there's a war for talent, as we know at the moment. There's way more jobs than there are people to fill them. So how are you creating an internal culture that really helps, your staff thrive and feel like they're engaged and happy in their work?
Yes, it's certainly a challenge we've been faced with. There's a number of things that we're doing, but there's probably a couple of key highlights. One that I'm quite proud of is about 2 years ago, we started a graduate program. We've come to the realization that, building a talent pipeline of young talent and continuing to fund that talent line year on year will create a long-term talent pool that we can pull from internally. So our goal is that, all promotions and all leadership positions are appointed internally, because we have such a rich talent pool. And the only way we're going to solve that challenge, we think, is through our graduate program. So we've into 2020 we invested in 14 graduates, and every year we continue to invest in 3 or 4. So that's a strong part of our talent pool, and another way in which we can diversify the team. We're taking part in a few other programs in the business. We have an Indigenous leadership program, which is helping us build on capability in other diverse areas of the business. But the other really important thing is we have this concept of diversity of thought. When we think about diversity, we start with the concept of what is going to bring us different thinking across different areas of the business, across different cultures, across different beliefs and values. And if we concentrate on diversity of thought, I feel that it will naturally create diverse people in the team as well. So that's something that we're trying to live and breathe when we work through the recruitment process. But our graduate program is a really strong part of that.
And can you tell me a little bit more about your Indigenous program and how that's been going?
Yeah, so that was launched a couple of years ago, and really what it's trying to do is it's trying to build confidence and inspire future leaders in the business. It's focused on our Maori Pacifica part of the business, and we think there's a lot of opportunity there for people to step up and grow with us. So it's been quite a targeted program, and it's been very successful. I've seen just so many amazing stories of people who have become more confident, who've just grown, who are stepping up. We have a couple of those individuals in our team in ICT, and they are almost different people. So that's been really exciting to watch those individuals develop.
That's great, and a real practical example there of encouraging more diversity, both in IT, but in the wider business. So, Nicholas, looking back on your own career, are there any kind of mistakes that stand out that, when you reflect on them, were a really good lesson for you that really shaped you as a leader?
Yep, it probably revolves around me doing too much myself. I think this is a common mistake for all leaders, is that they try and just do everything. So, a couple of years ago, I reached a point of physical and mental fatigue, and came to the realization that I'm just doing too much myself. And the learning there is, to empower my people to do more themselves, even if they don't necessarily know how to do it yet. They will find a way and they'll figure it out, just as I did. And I think as leaders, we have a natural human reaction to protect people, and so when we're thinking of protecting them, we do things ourselves, but in fact we're doing more harm to ourselves. So that's been a big lesson for me, is trying to empower other people to do more themselves, and to essentially do myself out of a job. If I'm not needed that much, then I've probably succeeded in developing people who can do the job for me. Yeah.
And very powerful for your team as well to have your backing, that they can pick up some of your role. So then, what's the best career advice you've ever received?
The best career advice I've ever received is from a very influential person who said to me that their entire career was built on and based around what was not being done. So everybody has a role, everybody has a job to do, and you come to work every day and you do your job, but there's also a lot of things, improvements, opportunities, problems that are not being taken care of, and someone's not doing that. But if you put up your hand and you do that, it's going to, first of all, it's going to get done, and secondly, it's going to help you to grow, because you're going to learn something new and you're going to get new skills. So I've never been shy to encourage people to say, hey, if you want to do that and no one else is doing it, if you want to put up your hand, just do it. You obviously you have your day job to do. You don't want to you don't want to neglect that. But if there's something that you want to put up your hand for, we try our best to support you in doing that. Yeah.
Great advice. And finally then, Nicholas, what's important to you in the months ahead?
Wow. So as an organization, we are growing at a phenomenal rate. And the biggest challenge for us is keeping up with that pace. We're trying to position ourselves to be ahead of that curve. We have new facilities opening up on a constant basis. We have just people growth. And so we were trying to, support the business with their growth while also trying to optimize the business at the same time. So a big focus is just keeping up with the phenomenal growth that we are experiencing, and recruitment, as most of the industry is challenged with, is recruitment. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's something every CIO at the moment is struggling with. Nicholas Fourie, Vice President for ICT at Fisher & Paykel, thank you so much for your time today.